So welcome back to Funding the Future, the stories behind the missions. Today I'm very excited to be joined by Penelope Frew from the Mito Foundation. How are you, Penelope?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks so much. So just for background, I had the pleasure of working with Penelope and Mito Foundation through my grant writing business and can confidently say they're an incredibly inspiring organisation with a strong focus on lived experience leadership. Penelope, in her role as development manager, is a really strategic leader and hugely committed to raising funds for people impacted by mitochondrial disease. So yeah, very excited to have you on board. So I wondered, for the listeners, maybe we'll start with a snapshot of what is Mito Foundation and what is mitochondrial disease.
Yes, great. So it is a pretty rare disease, so definitely good to start with some basics. So the Mito Foundation is Australia's peak body and only body dedicated to mitochondrial disease and community research and support. So mito is a rare genetic condition where the body's cells can't produce enough energy. It affects multiple organs, essentially wherever those mitochondria are not working properly, and it's progressive, has no cures, and can be life-limiting. It can also affect anybody at any age. So babies are often worse affected, dying at a very young age, and children and adults throughout their lives.
Yeah, pretty intense stuff. And so as sort of the peak body for Mito, you guys would work across a lot of different areas. Yeah, what are sort of the key focus areas for Mito Foundation?
So we work in the research space, funding research into primary mitochondrial disease, diagnosis, treatment options, and the more foundational fundamental research as well, understanding mitochondria themselves. We also run support services, so for people with mitochondrial disease to get in touch with us in multiple different ways, from the helpline to our MitoConnect program, where people are connected with other people with mitochondrial disease. Because it is so rare, it's often that nobody else has ever heard of it when you first get diagnosed. And we also do a lot of advocacy work, both on an individual level with the NDIS and getting people access to what they need, and on more of a systems level as well.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it's fairly comprehensive, really.
Yeah, we cover a lot of bases.
And what does, so I guess I've interviewed a few different people now, sort of more consultants and things in the grant writing space. So I wondered if you could give us a rundown of your role as development manager. What are sort of your key focus areas, and yeah, what are you working across?
Yeah, sure. We have a pretty small team here. It's myself and a relationship manager who looks after our major donors mainly and our bequest supporters. And then we have another team member who runs our Bloody Long Walk, which is our major fundraiser and brings in most of our money, actually, and is often very well known. So people would often know Bloody Long Walk more than they do the Mito Foundation or mitochondrial disease. So I work across all of the other types of fundraising. We do obviously have a grant program that I've worked with Alyssa on for a while. And then I have individual giving programs, including regular giving, appeals programs. We've got, always on acquisition programs running, multiple appeals during the year. Then we have, community fundraising is a big thing for us. The community that is connected with us do all sorts of amazing fundraisers they come up with. And we also run some organizational led community fundraisers like Lunch for Mito, Stay in Bed Day, various things over the years where we provide people with the resources to fundraise in their community. We also have some corporate support, most recently working closely with various industry partners to support some of our community events. And what am I missing? I think that's it.
Yeah, pretty detailed. I remember when I started with you guys, finding out about the Bloody Long Walk and how it works. It's such a clever idea, and what a fun way to raise funds and awareness at the same time. Yeah, it's awesome that you guys kind of invested in that strategy and it's really paid off.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fantastic fundraiser, and the awareness that we get from it is pretty phenomenal as well. So people join for the challenge, and it is quite a challenge at 35 kilometres, but then we get the opportunity to share what mitochondrial disease is and how it impacts people.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, what would you say inspires you most about working at Mito Foundation?
I think it always does come down to the community. I'm always sharing stories through our appeal programs of the community's resilience. And I think what inspires me to stay is just the urgency that there is to find treatments. There is no treatments, as I said earlier, no cures. But yeah, very few effective treatments for people with this disease. So families don't have the luxury of waiting. Every dollar raised has a clear line of sight to impact, I would say, whether that's support today or research and treatments in the future. So just having that really close link with the impact and the urgency to just get it done like yesterday.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember learning about, and I'm going to say this wrong, but I think it's Leber optic. How do you say it? Leber
You're doing very good.
myopathy.
To abbreviate to LH.
Yes, that's right, Lon. Yeah, that's much easier. Yeah, and just I think of reading some stories about people who had discovered they had that later in life. So that's where you can lose vision as part of it, isn't it? And yeah, how scary to go potentially blind later in life and for there to be no cure for that.
Yeah, there's one of the treatments that are coming through the pipeline, actually. There's been a treatment available for a while in other countries. And yeah, we're really focused on making sure that anything that's available out there in the world is then going to be available to Australians. LON is just one of those crazy types of mitochondrial disease. And for context, I think mitochondrial disease is essentially like cancer, like the umbrella term, and it can cover so many different types of disease. So yeah, you could be a healthy 30-year-old male, often have absolutely, no inkling that you're going to have this disease, and all of a sudden you lose sight in one eye and then often progresses to two eyes within, the space of a couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, wow.
And you're legally blind with no real options for reversing it at this point, but we're getting closer.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I guess that sort of leads into what's a cool outcome that you guys have achieved for the Mito community more recently? And that could be within like your team or more broadly in the organization.
Life does definitely lead on well, because I think it really is in that treatment space at the moment. We're all very focused on this clinical trials action plan that we've been working on, and just really focusing all of our efforts together on making sure that all of the treatments that are in the pipeline across the world. And there has been a real jump in the number of trial treatments and things that are being tested out there. So I'd say we're really seeing some green shoots of the action plan come into play already, and it's only the first year. So we're seeing relationships being built with international partners in industry. There's 3 mitochondrial disease treatments going through for FDA approval just in the last couple of months, and strong signals through our relationships that we're building that they are considering Australia as clinical trials sites. And they're probably some of the strongest signals yet that Australians with Mito will soon have access to treatments. So it's
Wow.
a long process, but these little wins, seeing treatments available, is really exciting.
Yeah, that's huge. It's something I hadn't thought about so much until working with you guys, the impacts of not having the trials in your own country. Yeah, you can just completely miss out, and as you sort of say, like FDA approval and things would take so much time, local approvals. Yeah, so if you're not part of these trials, you're missing out, entirely on potential treatments.
And with the progression of the disease as well, people just don't have that luxury of time to wait for them to be approved here. So anything that we can do to ensure people are getting the access to the treatments through the trials is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Have there been any sort of key turning points, do you think, in the history of Mito Foundation, sort of like roadblocks or things you've overcome? I guess that could be in a funding space or just as an organization. Sort of mentioned some things in terms of like getting clinical trials to Australia, but any other sort of key ones across the years?
There's definitely been some standout points, not in terms of roadblocks, but we had a major win a couple of years back where we were able to advocate for change in legislation for Mave's Law, which was allowing a technique called mitochondrial donation to be trialled here in Australia as well, to limit or stop the passing on from a mother to a baby of mitochondrial disease. So if you do have a diagnosis and you know that you have the disease, this technique was available in the UK. And then we worked for many years, I think around 10 years actually, advocacy work to try to get this allowed in Australia. And there's a pilot now being undertaken in Melbourne where people will actually be able to get involved in the program and potentially have babies free from Mito. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah, so is that starting now, the pilot in Melbourne?
Don't
Or
quote me on that, but yeah, it's very, very close to, I think they're starting to recruit.
wow, that must be an incredible feeling for people who have sort of been desperate for children but worried about passing it on. Yeah, that's phenomenal. No, that's a really good point. I guess on that front, or yeah, in terms of sort of challenges and things, do you think in terms of raising money for Mito, like there's specific challenges you guys face in being a rare disease organization?
Absolutely. So I would say there is, obviously there's low awareness. There's a small patient population in comparison to other diseases. And there is complexity, as with, a lot of diseases, but when they're more known, people have a base level, I guess, of understanding. So trying to explain the problem, the solution, and all of the complexities in both of those, which you could write a 30-page grant application on, but often we're trying to explain it in a 20-second reel on Instagram or in a 100-word grant description overview. So it is incredibly difficult to distill the complexity into a palatable, understandable way.
Yes, I feel, and that's definitely something I felt working with you guys. And I think we also got feedback from a funder once around that, for the first few years or more, obviously, you guys have been in business a lot longer, but yeah, it's just the grant writing itself almost becomes awareness raising because funders go, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. But then also, yeah, how do you, I think one funder sort of said we almost, not to fudge our numbers, but that, they really just want to see the most number of people impacted, which becomes really complicated because the need is certainly there, but not always the numbers that bigger funders want to see.
That's right. And like we always can, I think there's a ripple effect that doesn't always feel right to explain in the grants. But the fact is that the more we understand about mitochondria, which are part of, obviously, we all have mitochondria working. We all have aging processes happening, which are affecting our mitochondria. We have mitochondrial breakdown and mitochondria implicated in lots of different diseases, Parkinson's, dementia, all sorts of things. So we can definitely say that understanding mitochondria more will have an impact on potentially everybody, because the more that we understand how to keep our mitochondria healthy, that we can all benefit from that, as can many of the diseases that are related as well. We tend not to put that in those grant applications, and it is often a longer conversation that we kind of have to explain the complexities as well of that and those connections.
You're so right. I almost feel like rare disease orgs should get an extra, 200 words or so just to delve deeper into those kind of things. Because yeah, I remember sort of, yeah, where do you start? You could write a book on explaining to people what it is. And
Exactly.
yeah, particularly all of the other illnesses within that umbrella of mito diseases. Do you have any tips for translating the complex science of mito into applications or ways that funders can connect with it?
I think a human story always helps if you can include that. There's not always a place for it in a grant application. I do try, and I've had some success with it in the past, which I think you've probably seen as well, is if you can kind of entwine like that, the multiple human stories that this affects over a long period. So I think one example, which I believe we've both used in the past, is seed funding investment into a research project with a professor in Melbourne who was a young kind of emerging scientist at the time. And we want to keep as many people in mitochondrial disease research as possible. So we seed fund him with just $25,000, which is, small in the research landscape, big for us and big for him. But we probably wouldn't have been able to get funding otherwise. So that's your first person that's been affected early on, keeping somebody in this field that it's hard to find funding for. And then he's gone on to prove, the concept of proteomics in mitochondrial disease diagnosis. And he's gone on to run his own lab, train a whole lot of new emerging scientists in this mitochondrial disease space, as well as the proteomic space. And then that goes on to also have real world impact for families that we know. So there's a family that's been with, part of the mito community for a very long time. They've got a son that passed away from mitochondrial disease. His picture's on our wall, and he's just this adorable little kid who died when he was 3 years old. But it was because of the proteomics diagnosis technique that the professor that we invested in early on had developed, that the family was able to then test their embryos and have a family that then did not have mitochondrial disease in the future. So I think, it's so many people were affected along the way. It's not always just the impact on the families, but the researchers, building up that community in all different aspects. So I try to weave those stories in when I can, just to make people understand that it's not just, this one very complex piece of research about proteomics, because they are incredibly dry and hard to understand for most of us. So if you
Yes.
include those human stories.
No, that's a really good point, actually. I think then the fact that seed funding can then, I think a number of your researchers have then gone on to attract more funding, haven't they, from the sort of initial grants?
That's a very good point. Yes, that $25,000 then allowed him to get, I think it was $4.6 million from the government for additional research funding. It's just proof of concept that we're really focusing on.
Yeah. And it's a good point, the more people that are lost to other research projects, you want your best researchers on this, but then other fields are more attractive just because there's more funding, which I can understand from their perspective. It complicates things. Yeah. So no, I think those are really good points around sort of having a more human story. Do you what's the hardest dollar you feel like you've ever raised for Mito Foundation? Like, was it the particularly tricky funders, or like ways you've had to be creative to get people's funding?
I don't think I've got any really interesting out of the box ideas. I think that it really just comes down to trust and relationships that you build over time. I think that is, if you can, the hardest dollar is that unrestricted funding. Having a funder that is both, that has the scale and the ability to invest in a large amount that is really significant for us, but also trusts us to know that we're going to do with it, what we'd say we're going to do, or that has the greatest need and the most strategic importance to us as an organisation. So we have had some of those, recently, but they're a hard one, and it's a long term. They're proving ourselves as an organisation over and over again to allow them to know that they can trust us with their investment.
That's true. Yeah. The consistency, because I think we also, I was working with you guys, we had applied to one funder for several years with, a no response, but still sort of encouraged to reapply. And then we did eventually end up getting a win from them, which is a real testament to being persistent, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah. And I guess speaks to that challenge of potentially being a rare disease org, and eventually people sort of seeing the real need and urgency.
Yeah, agreed.
Is there anything that you feel like funders need to know better or understand about rare disease orgs, like other ways that they could be more accommodating to the mission? Or
I feel like this movement's already happening. I feel like any talks or, just being involved in perpetual grant rounds and things, there seems to be a movement towards trusting organisations more to do what they know best. But I think, especially with rare disease organisations, we're often small. And, any unnecessary administration does become particularly burdensome. So just, keeping that administration to a minimum is really helpful for us. Often fundraisers are wearing several different hats. So, even just like, I think that reporting is incredibly important for all of us, but just making sure that they're, not really rigid, strict forms you've got to fill out, that it may not be relevant. I guess ensuring that everything that you're asking of us is relevant is helpful.
That's true, especially like you're already sort of wearing several hats, I feel, even in a development manager role. And those reports could easily fall by the wayside, I'd imagine. But that's a good point though. That sort of easy, flexible ways for people to report things is often, or I guess even ways you could double up on, send the same report to several funders or something to minimize the admin burden.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're always reporting, we're always evaluating our work. So just being able to integrate what we're already doing rather than meeting their, new different obligations.
True, yeah. Do you guys find as an organization, is it difficult to balance the pressure to sort of scale and expand services with keeping quite a stable organization and not kind of taking on too much with a small staff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we actually recently went through a bit of a retraction kind of phase. We're just trying to always prioritize that kind of core impact and strategy. And it is quite easy when you're an organisation like us. Like there's no one else that's doing this work here in Australia. So would be and has been easy in the past to try to do everything that's asked of us. But yeah, I was really proud of our organisation recently when we actually just came back to basics and said, well, what's really our key priority here? What's going to have the biggest impact? And pulling back those areas that weren't necessarily reaching large amounts of people or having the impact that we wanted.
That's a good lesson, I feel, for anyone listening. I feel like often you can feel like you're going backwards, but actually you're probably maximizing your impact by doing that because you can do what you're already doing better.
Yeah. Try not to please everybody all the time.
That's true. Yeah, there would be a lot of pressure, I'd imagine. And the challenge, do you find, is that a sort of an added challenge of being community led, that you want to be able to do more things based on community feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always want to be led by the people with lived experience, and that's always going to inform our work. But yeah, just like any group, we still need to kind of streamline their requests and make sure that we're the best people or the best organisation to actually meet those needs. So you don't want to do, create any kind of overlap, try to collaborate where we can. Yeah, just make sure that we're as efficient as possible.
True. So if Mito Foundation was offered $1 million in untethered funds tomorrow, what would you guys do with it? What would you be able to achieve?
I think that it would just back our plan, which is the clinical trials action plan. And yeah, it could easily absorb $1 million. Just we would be able to fund some new kind of coordination roles. A lot of it is the kind of unsexy behind the scenes work that does take a person doing relationship building over time, connecting people. A lot of it would then be able to go into research as well. So we've got some amazing research partners that we could support on a larger scale. So we do love that seed funding, but getting some money behind some clinical fellows that have the clinical trials expertise would be amazing. We could definitely improve our data and our registry collection. We could definitely ramp up our capabilities in the support services area. I think there is probably a whole, I think we get to this later, but sorry, I won't go into too much, but there's a whole space with the developments in AI where there'll be solutions to our problems that we just don't have the time or money to stop and think what they could be. So an investment in our technology could be see us take leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like you're not the first person to say that it is often the less attractive things of an organization that the funding would go to. And I think I think in my head I was always like, I guess organizations often have these really kind of big ideas, which I know you guys definitely do. But at the same time, if you're not funding those sort of smaller things, you can't maximize your impact, or you can't move forward as an organization, because you just take on this wildly difficult project and then have sort of nothing left at the end of it, or it would do the organization in or something like that.
There was a Philanthropy Australia meeting recently where Julia Gillard was talking about her, I think she was doing a keynote speech, and it was all about funding the glue. And so I think that's really stuck with me. I think that we are there. We are the glue. There is all different organizations doing amazing things, and we're not trying to do what they do. We're not a research organization. We're not clinicians. We do the work to keep all of those together and to keep the momentum moving. So I think a lot of the work in not-for-profits can't happen without the funding the glue that keeps it all working.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That sort of coordination role you guys play, if clinical trials were to come to Australia, you guys would be an important link to the community and to the research side. Yeah, definitely the glue, I think, is a nice metaphor for that.
Yeah.
Have you guys had, I mean, and maybe not, but are there any sort of grant or fundraising fails that you've learnt from the most? Perhaps an unsuccessful result that you're able to leverage into a success later? I know that's a tough question.
Yeah, I have not prepared an answer for that one, because I can't think of a good example. I can think of it always feels like a failure with our perpetual grant applications, because we put a lot of work into those every single year.
Yeah.
I think maybe in 8 years ago we got one, but every year we miss out. We're putting everything into it and, yeah, really putting our best foot forward and getting through those initial rounds to make, I think they're indicating that as an organization, we're good, we're sound, they're happy to fund us. Just our projects never make it through that final step. And it is just, yeah, it's crazy infuriating once you spend all that time and effort and, got your 2 applications there in your pipeline on Salesforce, $100,000 or, all kind of crossing your fingers. Then year after year, I think, every year I've been here 8 years now, we put them in, hope for the best. And you get very little feedback. So it's just frustrating. So I can't say that I've turned that into a success yet, but who knows? This might be the year.
That's a good point, actually. I feel I totally feel your pain from working on, because also I think what's really nice about the perpetual applications is you can put in for, they sort of say, go for whatever is of most urgent need for the organization. And so I feel like you guys have come up with some really awesome projects, like a lot of the clinical trial ones, or not clinical trials, sorry, the fellowships. There was some really kind of cutting it, like physio, investigating what that looks like for managing Mito. And yeah, and you guys almost peaked too early, or not too, because by getting the first one and then it gives hope, and then and you can't not apply as well, which I'd appreciate. That's very frustrating. And you do always pass the sort of organizational checklist, you're a very sound org.
Straight.
But you never know.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe persistence
paid off in the past, so we'll carry on.
Yeah, that's it. Are there any time-saving hacks? I mean, given you work across sort of many different aspects of fundraising, are there any sort of things you do in your day-to-day that you think have really streamlined your processes?
Definitely just use of generative AI these days. I think a lot of our work goes through various chat GPTs. We've got brand voice GPT that we all share. We've got various fundraising campaign ones, projects that we're working on. And I think it's just saved an incredible amount of time to just repurpose content and initial drafts. And I think we're only just kind of touching the surface on what is available there to create those efficiencies.
Yeah, that's a really nice segue. My next question was sort of around the role you see AI playing in the future of your work at Mito. Would you say it's for the better rather than the worse? I've seen a lot online of, various opinions.
Look, I think where we're at now, we're just looking to jump on the bandwagon and try to take advantage of those efficiencies. But I'm also mindful, the way the world is going and moving, and kind of the race to improve on that and the safety issues and everything. So I think, yes, net positive for now. Who knows 10 years what that's going to be. But yeah, I think there's still a lot that we can gain from it at this point in time. Certainly administrative load it's helped a lot with that. And we're running a program internally at the moment, just getting our organization literate in AI. And then the next phase is just to see what answers or problems it can solve for us as well, because I know there's a lot of organizations out there using technology to reach new audiences or provide new services. So I think there's definitely an untapped potential there for, who knows what problems it could solve at this point.
That's cool. So does that mean, are you guys going through like an organizational training or to sort of get everyone up to speed?
Yeah, I'm leading on that, just to take the organization on a journey, really, just to make sure that we're all moving. I think there's always going to be early adopters and people who are playing with it regardless. Also putting those guardrails in to make sure that we're all using it ethically and safely, and making sure our data is always safe. And yeah, so it's good. It's really an exciting project for me personally, because I love using it, and I've seen so many benefits so far. And then, I'm excited to get to that next stage of when we're all kind of thinking in that way of what tools are out there that could we build potentially that will increase and enhance our impact.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's a good point too that, there's always going to be people with varying levels of tech savviness on a team. And so it is also about bringing everyone along on that journey, I guess, so that not only your team are reaping the benefits, but the broader organization is also. Yeah, no, that's really cool.
You don't know what you don't know with AI, I think, at the moment as well. So it's really good to kind of have the conversation going constantly with everybody, learning tips and tricks. And you're like, oh gosh, I didn't even know I could, I don't know, create a presentation like that in 2 seconds.
Yeah, true. I do like, sort of the thing. I wonder if particularly in like your relationship building work, I find it really useful, at least from a grants perspective, writing things like support letters that often just are quite generic and they can be time consuming, but you can get them done in seconds with ChatGPT or, and not that you're not putting a nice personal touch into it, but it just gets you the framework really quickly.
That's right, exactly. And I think that human judgment staying central is really important, certainly what we're always keeping in mind.
Yeah, true.
Moving forward with AI, it's like this, just to make sure that there's always human oversight and human judgment involved.
That's true. Yeah, it's just your starting point, isn't it? And then sort of needs refining and things. What gives you hope about the future of impact-driven work for not-for-profits? I know we often kind of look at the downside or the challenges that not-for-profits face, but it's nice to also look at some of the positives.
Yeah, and I think kind of going back to that, what I was talking about earlier, the Philanthropy Australia talks, I feel like funders and the philanthropy sector in general is definitely maturing to a point where they can trust organisations to do the work that we're setting out to do, and really understanding the complexity and funding the glue and changing some of those power dynamics. And I feel like it's a wonderful field that is maturing, and I see that the impact sector will benefit from that in the long run.
True, that's a really nice point. I know that you guys have probably seen the Pay What It Takes report from Social Ventures Australia. That's kind of been circulating and is really exciting, I think, especially when, you have to justify really strongly the administrative spend often. But it's nice to see some advocacy for administrative expenses to be covered.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another great example, which is giving me lots of hope, actually.
Yeah. No, it is. Yeah, you're right. That is an exciting time in terms of philanthropy. Well, we have been very efficient, but I just have a rapid fire 3 questions to close out our time. Can you give me one word to describe fundraising or grant writing?
Relational.
I like that. That's nice. What's the most underrated skill in not-for-profit work?
Prioritization.
That's a good point. Absolutely. We all struggle with that one. And do you have a not-for-profit hero? Someone, and it could be an organisation or an individual.
I don't actually have one. I think that there are many, and I've just kind of described what they are to me. And that's organisations that consistently pair lived experience with rigour and leaders who protect mission over ego.
I like that. Yeah.
So I think that includes Mito Foundation. I think our leaders definitely do that mission over ego part and the lived experience and rigour altogether. But there's lots of other, probably because I'm in this space, I see a lot of other small rare disease organisations doing the same thing.
Yeah, true. No, mission over ego. I think that's, really well said.
Certainly not the case with not-for-profit leaders or leaders in general.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it becomes tricky, doesn't it? It can kind of all be melded in together sometimes. But yeah. No, well, thank you so much for your time. It's so great to get your insights. And I know it's always busy, so appreciate people's time joining the podcast.
Well, it's been wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I will just close out by saying the podcast is powered by Grant Drafter, helping organisations to draft their next grant in 5 minutes or less. If you haven't already, for those listening, check out the Grant Drafter website at grantdrafter.com. And for those listening, we hope you're feeling inspired to get out there and maximise your impact.